Ever since I was 5, I've always hated clowns. I could barely ever bring myself into a circus without bawling my eyes out for my parents to take me home. I couldn't bring myself to watch it. I didn't even like McDonald's while Ronald McDonald was still a thing. I'm not a perfect person because I'm very honest about my flaws. I hate heights, spiders, and I lock my doors every night due to my anxiety. I'm even afraid of going to the bathroom because I feel like a snake or something's gonna bite my back end, or worse. But my biggest fear was always definitely clowns. And now I have more of a reason to be afraid of them, as do my friends, or what's left of them. Last Halloween, my friends decided to pull a prank on me, but it all went wrong incredibly fast. I was in my room, doing the usual, on my video game system, not really playing anything. I was on YouTube watching some videos, not very interesting ones, just a bunch of gaming tutorials. My phone rings as I let out a heavy sigh. "Hello?" I said sheepishly, still watching my small 24-inch television. It was Brian, telling me we were going out exploring tonight. I was tempted to say no, but knowing Brian, he always knew ways to get under my skin. He told me there was this theme park that was abandoned and closed. And it being Halloween, he thought it was the perfect time. He said no one had been there for years, and if there were, he'd run to his truck and grab his gun. We were all adults now, and I told him that these games were childish, but he insisted. I finally agreed and got my jacket on and grabbed a few things. We'd done this a lot in the past, exploring caves and forests as kids, and our town was quiet and peacefully small. Rarely anything ever happened in our town, or so we thought. Brian had picked me up and taken me to the park, where my 4 other friends were waiting. Bill, Tim, Andy, and Sid were all there in their cars. Bill and Sid were sitting in their cars quietly as they saw me before coming outside to greet me, as did Tim and Andy. We sat and talked for a little bit, talking about the small adventures we had when we were younger, and how we'd freak out and jump every time we saw a cricket jump or a squirrel run. "So, you guys ready to do this?" Sid said, eagerly. "We meet back here at 11 p.m., so you have about 30 minutes to explore," Brian said with a leader-like tone. I nodded and began to walk away from the group, following Brian as we went to explore the north half of the abandoned theme park. I could hear Sid and Bill breaking stuff nearby, laughing, which I found to be a pretty stupid idea, but the place was abandoned, so I don't think anyone would have cared anyways. We walked further and further as we made it to this tunnel-like place. It looked like one of those Tunnel of Horrors rides. As we went deeper, abandoned 1950s-style horror cutouts made from cardboard stuck out like a sore thumb, covered in green vines and decay. The old place smelled like mildew and all kinds of disgusting crap. We finally made our way out of the exit when we suddenly heard a thud behind us. I turned around and looked back only to see nothing. I sighed as I kept moving forwards. Right before I left through the door, suddenly a clown jumped out with a giggle. I jumped back and scampered backwards, a scream escaping my lips as suddenly a laugh echoed throughout the tunnels. I turned around to see Tim, Bill, and Andy laughing at me just behind me, my jeans wet with water and my own urine. "You should have seen your face," Sid said with a hyena-like laugh. My face flushed red with anger before I stood up. "You stupid fucker," I yelled before shoving him out of the way. "I knew I shouldn't have come out here tonight." Sid took off the mask. "Come on, Jason, it was just a joke," he said with a small laugh. "Fuck you," I swore at him and continued walking back to the cars. I was utterly already sick of this shit. I had a panic attack, and at this point I was ready to go home. I walked back to the cars and sighed, kicking a brick along the way before getting in Brian's car. I winced in pain, noticing glass was on the seat. I looked up before seeing the window of the car had been smashed. My eyes widened, as did my mouth. I looked to the side to see the wires had been torn out, along with the other cars in a similar state. But worst of all, the gun. It was gone, including the ammunition with it. I heard the guys coming back before seeing the looks on their faces. Suddenly, a look of very foul anger came over Bill's face. "My fucking car!" he yelled in anger, glaring at me. "You stupid dumbass. Do you know how much this car costs?" The guys were furious at this point as I got out of the truck. I didn't do this," I yelled over Bill's voice. He came over to me and grabbed my shirt, pushing me against the truck. "Then who did?" he said angrily. I panted and looked at him before suddenly a silhouette appeared in the distance. I don't know if I was hallucinating at this point, but my heart raced. "Just because you piss your pants doesn't mean you have the right to take your issues out on my car," Bill said angrily. Suddenly, the shadow made itself known, and to my horror, it was a clown. It looked like the same mask Sid wore, except I didn't see Sid come out with the others. Brian looked at the clown and sighed. "All right, Sid, you've had your fun, cut it out," he said with fury. Suddenly, the clown pulled off its mask, revealing himself. It wasn't Sid. It was a man with a painted white face, blood over his mouth and eyes. He smiled at me, wickedly, before letting out a wicked laugh. I yelled and ran off back into the abandoned theme park, grabbing my phone as quickly as I could. I ran into an old tent, only to scream loudly. Sid was hanging from a street pole, his entrails wrapped around his throat, hanging him by the neck. His eyes were missing. Corndog skewers stabbed into his chest. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, calling the police immediately. I kept low and quiet, but that wasn't enough to hide from him. I saw him coming this way through a hole in the tent. I grabbed a corndog skewer from the ground and hid, my back pressed against the tent. I began to hear giggling, loud giggling. I heard nearby, beads of sweat rolling down my forehead. "If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands." I heard two gloves clapping. I panicked, hearing the clown getting closer to me. He continued the song and clapped again, each clap getting closer than before. I bit down on my lip to keep from screaming. Sid's blood all over my back. "If you're happy and you know it, and you really wanna show it. If you're happy and you know it."
Clap your hands!
He pulled the tent back and revealed my hiding spot. I could see what he looked like now. His face looked directly in mine. His eyes were bloodshot, his lips curved into an insane grin as he raised his knife to stab me. I screamed and mustered up what little courage I had. I used the skewer and stabbed the clown right in the shoulder, running out of the tent as fast as I could. Finally, I made my way back to the clearing, and my friends ran out with me. Except one. Brian. I saw multiple cop cars appear. Bright and flashing lights blurred my vision.
Get on the ground!
I heard a cop exclaim, pointing his gun at us. I laid on the wet ground and spread my arms and legs. "He's in there!" I yelled as I kept my head down. The cops finally came over to us and put us into their cars, all of us in hysterics, and I worried about Brian while they drove us to the police station. The police told us the legend about why that amusement park was closed down. We were told later on that morning that that clown had escaped from a mental asylum in a county far from us about 30 years ago. He was known for skinning his victims. People started noticing people disappearing, including children and dogs. The park was closed down 20 years ago in 1996. I wish I could say that we were all okay and the story ended there, that we went on with our lives as usual, and that nothing happened. But that's not what happened. What happened later was much, much worse. We went to Sid's funeral a few days later. Sid's father and mother never talked to us again. Andy went insane and was sent to the state mental psychiatric hospital. Tim was found dead in his apartment 2 months ago. A suicide note on his bedstand. He said he couldn't take it anymore and that clown still haunted his memory. Bill just left town. He luckily had enough to get his car repaired a few days later and moved somewhere out of state. And I never saw Brian again. The trauma from that night was too much for all of us. But the worst of it all is that that bastard clown is still out there. He's still lurking somewhere. The police never caught him, which means that clown's still at large. Sometimes I still see him in my nightmares, when I close my eyes in the shower, when I turn off the lights in my house to go to bed. I'm on medication now for my PTSD, but my fear still isn't gone. I've become even more paranoid, and I can barely sleep. I hear a knock on the door as I go to look in the eye hole. Is that you, Brian?